Today I'm joined by another amazing woman. I'm joined by Holly Lynham. She's an avid reader. She enjoys crafts. At the moment, she's particularly focusing on knitting and crocheting. She's a very supportive daughter. She's a dog and cat lover. She's got 2 dogs, 4 cats, and a couple of fish. She's a mum and a wife. And trigger warning, because I have mentioned this a few times on the podcast, I cry really easily. So if I cry, I'm going to pause it. I'll pull myself together and we'll get going. But we are talking about mitochondrial disease, dysfunctional disorder. When I Googled it, I got different names for it. But that's what we're here to talk about today. So thank you for joining me, Holly.
You're welcome.
So before we get started, tell me a little bit about what I'm going to call it mito, because that seems to be the common one across all of the different things.
Yeah.
So tell me a little bit about what that actually is.
It's a collection of, well, my understanding of it is it's a collection of different disorders and diseases that occur at the time of conception. So some of them are fatal, some of them aren't, but it's quite a big category, and there's so many different variations.
So it's a bit of a catch-all for a number of different disorders.
Yeah. Yep.
So you're here speaking as a mum of a child who was born with mito?
Yes. Yep.
So tell me about your experience.
We fell pregnant. It was first pregnancy. Everything was fine. All of our tests were perfectly normal. We had no indication whatsoever that there was anything wrong until, my labour stalled a couple of times, and then what's the word? Where the baby poos before it's born.
Oh, the meconium?
That's the one, yeah. So that had happened, when they broke my waters, they found that. And they were trying to get a blood sample off the top of his head and couldn't. So they were like, emergency C, rushed me in for that. And he wasn't breathing when he was born, so they had to resuscitate him. This is all in very short detail. Yeah, we can go into more. Yeah. I didn't know how much detail you wanted. So he was rushed off to PCH pretty quickly, and he survived for 5 days on life support. And that was what happened there, really. In a really
nutshell, yeah. So the whole pregnancy, you had no inkling at all that there was...
No, there was nothing to suggest that there was anything wrong. All the tests were normal, all the scans were normal. Yeah.
Would there normally be something to give you some kind of warning?
I don't know in terms of other mitochondrial disorders, but with Logan's, no. Without doing a muscle sample test or a brain CT, that's how they diagnosed it. With the diagnosis. Yeah. So, they had huge suspicions of exactly his specific E73, I believe it's called. So they had particular suspicions that that's what it was.
But that was after he was born?
Yeah. And then, so he had a post-mortem CT. I think it was a CT or MRI, confirmed the brain composition, very different from how it should have been. Yeah. And they'd also, before he passed away, they took a sample of his muscle tissue to send to eastern states somewhere where they have the testing facilities for it. And that was confirmed. Yeah, I think it took a few weeks, but they confirmed it with that, yeah.
I have so many questions.
Yeah, absolutely. Sorry, I just didn't know how much...
No, you're good. So he went off to PCH.
Yeah, so they pulled him out of me. They whipped him away, and I said to my hubby, follow him.
Yeah,
don't let him be alone. And then they filled him full of tubes and whatnot. And called they were on the phone to PCH going, what do we do, kind of thing.
Because where were you?
I was at Armidale.
Oh, that's such a long way.
Yeah. They called PCH, and PCH were like, okay, we're going to send the ambulance. So they have this special transport thing for infants, which is crazy. It's like
It's a NICU on wheels.
Yeah. It's this like little chamber. Well, it's not little, it's quite big, but yeah, it's mad. So yeah, they brought him in to see me then before they whisked him away, but obviously he was inside it already. So I at this stage, this was the first time I was seeing him. Hours later.
Oh, of course, because you wouldn't have got to hold him or anything because they just took him away to try and resuscitate him.
Yeah, that's right, yeah. So, yeah, this was my first time seeing him, and obviously, he's all in this...
full of tubes.
And I can't touch him, I can't, I was exhausted. I'd been in labour for 3 days, so, as well, and I lost a bit of blood during the C-section as well, so I was just sort of like... really exhausted. I'm just looking at him like, that's my baby, and I can't even touch him.
And this happened during COVID as well?
Yeah, right in the middle of COVID.
So could you have your parents there with you to try and...
So, yeah, they let me have my mum while Clint... Well, whenever Clint wasn't there, my mum was allowed to be there. So I could have one person, and that was it, yeah.
Because the thought of having your baby in a different hospital, but the first time you see him, he's full of tubes, he's gone off with your husband, you're exhausted, you haven't slept for 3 days, and then to be so isolated as well.
Yep, that was tough, yeah.
So were you able to go to peace, because you've just had a Caesar?
Yeah.
It's not like you can just go, well, he's going, I'm going.
Yeah, so the next day they were able to... They left they did me a fresh catheter and sent me off with my little bag of wee. Yeah.
Also, Holly's holding it above her head as she's
it
definitely wasn't above your head.
It's not a drip, it's down there. But, it was
That's
there.
flowing the wrong way.
Yeah. It sent me off on a day trip. They sort of gave me a day release to go and... see him. So I spent, they gave us a room at PCH as well, which was incredible. So
but also scary because at this point you didn't know what was happening.
No idea.
So if my experience. So PCH is Perth Children's Hospital.
Yep. And
my experience with Perth Children's Hospital, the children's hospitals, is that they're really busy. If they're giving you a private room, this is something I need to be scared about.
Yeah. Yep.
So, I mean, amazing, but also now I'm going, well, what's going on?
Yeah.
Because we're in a room by ourselves and that doesn't happen.
Yeah. So they gave us a room with a bed and stuff like that. So,
my goodness.
An ensuite, we had, it was like a hotel room, but a hospital bed, like a double hospital bed, which was strange. But and then he obviously was in another area of the hospital. But so got to go see him and have a chat. And at this stage, they still didn't know, didn't have much of an idea of what was going on. They were just running test after test after test, and he was hooked up to all these machines all around him, which, quite a confronting sight, seeing all these... so many machines, and he's full of tubes, they're up his nose, in his mouth, everything attached to him. So it was a pretty confronting sight, and, and I still can't pick him up because he's all hooked up. Then I got to, see him properly and touch him and give him a kiss and all that, but I've still not actually held him at this point. So that was, it was sort of... I wasn't really... I felt a bit detached from it at that point. It was very surreal, I was like, I don't... everything could be fine. This is all going to be fine. They'll figure out what's wrong. They'll fix him up and he'll come home good as new. It'll be, This
isn't the beginning that we thought of, but we're still going to... This will be a great story to tell at his 21st. And
It's just a little blip and everything's going to be fine. My husband, on the other hand, was... He figured it out, he knew he wasn't coming home. But, I was just in complete denial.
But those first days are so... Everything's such a blur anyway.
Yeah.
And you've just had a baby. You've just had a Caesar. So unless somebody actually comes out and tells you, it is all just surreal anyway.
Yeah, definitely, yeah. And nobody was saying, even towards the end, it was like, it was very gently suggested rather than outright just, he ain't going to make it kind of, which, so it was, they very gently led me towards that conclusion rather than outright saying it, But yeah, so then that night I was back at Armadale and...
How did you go leaving him?
I mean, it was tough, but, I was still...
Oh, yeah.
In that mindset of everything's going to be fine,
Yeah.
and, I'm still exhausted,
Yeah.
I'm fatigued, the blood loss and all the emotions and everything, I just sort of thought, oh, okay, all right, off we go.
Yeah.
And then, the next morning they're like, oh, we need to give you a blood transfusion because your hemoglobin hasn't picked back up or whatever. And I'm like, I don't have time, bud. I'm out of here.
Unless you can hook that up with another bag and I'll take it with me.
Yeah, because PCH had sort of called and said she needs to be
come.
here.
Yeah.
So I was like, my husband's on his way to pick me up. You need, unless you can do it in
the next 10 minutes.
Yeah. I'm going. I'm checking myself out of here. So, so I did check out.
So you left on day 2? Left hospital on day 2?
Yeah. And went to PCH. They had a midwife on site that checked in on me and things like that to make sure I was doing okay and see if I needed anything, in terms of...
The Caesar.
Yeah. And, Armadale had given me the Clexane and all that sort of stuff that I needed. Yeah, I was just out there and they were like, if you do feel like you need a transfusion later on, you can come in as a day patient kind of thing. So they were really good about it. The nurses at Armadale the midwives were absolutely fantastic. They were just brilliant. They were all really supportive and really helpful and stuff. So they helped me get out of there as quick as possible when I was like, we got to go. So then we spent, I think it was 3 nights at PCH. So like I say, we had a room with a bed and an ensuite and
Worst hotel stay ever.
Yeah. So, and we didn't have anything. All we had was my go bag, for the hospital. That's all we had. So, it was like, hey, Mum, can you bring me this? Can you bring me that? We were on very minimal sort of resources there. But, having thought we'd only be there for a couple of days.
Yeah.
We just didn't have a lot. They were actually, PCH were really incredible about it because obviously middle of COVID, it should have just been me and hubby.
Yeah.
But our parents and siblings were all allowed to be there. They sort of knew right from the get-go that he wasn't coming home.
Yeah.
So they were pretty, happy for us to have the extra people there.
Thank goodness.
Yeah, for the support and everything. And
did they get to meet him?
Yeah. Spent plenty of time with him. We had when I'd sort of realised where we were headed, they said, oh, do you want to have him baptised or anything like that? And hubby had gone, no, we're not religious, And I sort of said, well, we're not going to bring him home for a birthday celebration or a Christmas celebration, this is something that we can all do together as a family and so Annie went, I understand that, let's do it then. So they have a priest there. And,
they've got their chapel and...
So she came and, did that for us. And at the same time, there's also an organisation called Heartfelt. Yeah. So they sent a photographer to come and get heaps of photos, like professional photos and stuff of him, and I was with him and things like that. So, they were incredible. They organised quite a lot of stuff for us in that respect. That was... so we had to... Even at that point then, they decided, I was a bit cheeky and I said, can we bring in the godparents?
Yeah. We weren't going to have a baptism, but actually now we've got 12 godparents to bring in.
So they let us do. They were like, that's okay. You can do that for one visit. So they actually got to come in and meet him briefly. So that, you know, that was great as well for them, and to have that little piece of, you know, that I was so surprised by the emotion that it evoked from everybody else. I wasn't.
You weren't there yet.
I wasn't the only one feeling it.
Oh, yeah.
You know, everybody, it wasn't just me and hubby, or me and, you know, hubby and our parents kind of thing. It was everyone around us just was, heartbroken the whole way through. So, like I had a constant barrage of people texting and things like that. And I mean, I wasn't answering anybody. I just didn't have the capacity for it.
Zero bandwidth.
Yeah. So my mum was sharing all the information with our family in England, and also with my best mate over here that was passing on all the information to whoever, she thought needed it. So,
So as much as it was good for the godparents to get to be in there, I imagine for you, like, one of the things when I had my children, and I know that things have changed, but when I had my children, one of the things that I looked forward to, I know this is going to sound weird, but was having people come and visit in the hospital and getting to show off your new baby. And so I had assumed that because it was COVID, you would have missed out on that experience.
Yeah.
So
and ordinarily, yes. I would have. Yeah.
So I thought that you would have missed it completely.
Yeah.
But you still got to have that part of getting to go, this is our baby.
Yes. Yeah.
So which would have been, that's huge.
Yeah, we were very fortunate that the hospital relaxed their rules for us, because it wasn't
lucky.
Yeah, it wasn't something they were doing for everyone, that's for sure. So we were very, very lucky.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so with this, so did you get to hold him?
Yes, eventually. A few times actually. It was, they had to do it very carefully, and
move this wire, move this cord.
I had to be sat in a special reclining chair with a pillow propping my arms, and they would lay him in my arms, and just get to hold him, just like that. It wasn't, I. So it was just the typical, in your
little
arms.
cradle.
So, And, hubby got to have a hold as well. And even at the end, my mum got to have a little hold of him as well. So, yeah.
And was he on life support the entire time?
Yeah. When they first resuscitated him, Armadale, and my husband followed him, he was conscious then and wriggling around. He took a little video of him wriggling around and stuff. But after that, he never regained consciousness. So I actually never saw him conscious, which was a difficult thing to process. Was that, I never got to sort of go, hey, I'm your mum, and but I do think he recognised, who I was, because when my mum was holding him on the last day, all his stats dropped, and then when they put him back in my arms, he stabilised again, which was, that was lovely and heartbreaking at the same time.
Okay, I just need a second.
Yeah, go for it.
So you said that there was like gentle suggestions that he wasn't going to make it, you weren't going to get to take him home.
Yeah.
Do you think it would have been easier if they'd told you outright? Like, what would you have preferred?
Normally I would have said, an outright answer would have been better, but I think this particular turn of events I think it worked that way. I think I got to come to terms with it in my own time, rather than it being thrust upon me.
Yeah.
And I think that worked in my favour, to be honest. Yeah, normally I'm like, just tell me up front what's going on, stop, beating around the bush kind of thing. But I think this particular occasion, it was actually beneficial.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so how So we're at sort of a couple of days in. How did it actually go to him passing away?
So they sort of pulled us in to a meeting with the midwives and the doctors and all that. We had a specialist in mitochondrial disorder as well over because, she was the one who
suspected it.
Yeah. And they sort of said, look, we think it's time you need to make a decision. And I was like, okay, well, tomorrow. I can't do, just, as you've put me on the spot right now, I can't do this now. Like, give me, let me do the things I need to do first. We're like, okay, we'll get the baptism done. We'll get the godparents in, and then we can say goodbye, kind of thing. So, so it was, the next day we got everything done, and then turned off life support.
Were you all with him?
It was just me, hubby, and my mum, and then mum left us to have some alone time with him as well. Yeah, it was more of a private sort of thing, saying goodbye to him like that.
That must have killed the grandparents.
Yeah.
So you're a parent yourself.
Yeah.
So for your parents and Clint's parents to have to leave you to do that alone, that must have killed them. But also for them to not get to be there for themselves.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, that would have been so incredibly difficult.
Yeah. I mean, my dad found the whole thing from the get-go very confronting. He's a very sensitive person, and he struggled to be even in the room with Logan at any stage because of, all the machines and tubes and stuff. He found that very difficult. He was quite happy not happy, but he was comfortable sitting in the waiting room with us, while we were having lunch and having a break and whatever we needed to do. But actually being in the room with him, he found very confronting. So there's no way he would have been there when we actually said goodbye anyway.
Is there guilt around that, do you think? Or not necessarily guilt, but regret that he could have spent more time with Logan and didn't? Or do you think that's... it's hard for you to answer for somebody else.
I can't really speak for him, but I think he did what he could.
Yeah. I'm just imagining you'd be so torn to want to spend, particularly when you know that he's going to have such a short life.
Yeah. Yeah.
You'd be so torn with wanting to spend as much time with him as physically possible, but also how incredibly difficult it is to be in that space. And so that must, just an extra layer of challenge there as well.
Yeah. He was sort of in the same boat as me, thinking he'd be coming home, everything could be fine. And, when I told him, we've made the decision, it's happening tomorrow, that hit him really, really hard because he still wasn't expecting it,
How did you go having to break that news to people, particularly when you know your dad well, that he's not going to take this well?
Yeah.
That's a huge burden for you to have to be the person to share that news.
Yeah. Honestly, I think I was a bit selfish at that point and wasn't really thinking about what other people needed.
I'm not sure if it's selfish, totally numb maybe.
Yeah. I was more sort of just thinking about what I needed and so I didn't even consider, to be honest, how he was going to take the news. I was not there for that at all in terms of,
But even not thinking about how somebody else is going to receive it, how did it feel to have to say that out loud?
It was more his reaction to it than, I hadn't really thought about how, I assumed everyone was sort of on that same page with us, that this was going to be happening at some point anyway, and didn't realise that he hadn't.
He wasn't quite up to that chapter of the book yet.
Yeah. So his reaction to it was quite slap in the face, I suppose. We just, it was like feeling that heartbreak again of, you know, oh, we made that decision, but then he hadn't realised that that was what was happening and where it was all going to be headed anyway. And yeah, to have him take it the way he did was quite a shock. Yeah.
So were you able to hold him while not your dad, Logan?
Yeah.
Were you able to hold him while he passed away?
Yes.
Yeah.
They put him in my arms and the same way they had done previously, and then they disconnected him, and and they'd gotten him all dressed beforehand as well. We had the clothes in our go
going
bag.
home clothes.
Yeah. So we popped those on him and whatnot, and held him as he went, and and then hubby got to do the over the shoulder cuddle that he'd been dying to do since he came out. So that was, I mean, it was peaceful, but it was also just devastating. But yeah, it was a peaceful passing for him, and we sort of tried to keep it very, very calm and just full of love rather than
torrential sobbing.
That all came later. But yeah, at the time we just wanted him to feel loved, so we did what we could. Yeah. In that respect, yeah.
How did you go leaving?
I found that difficult. They had offered, they had to whisk him away quite quickly to have the brain scan.
Okay.
Yeah, we still, they didn't give us, they didn't rush
It wasn't
us or
like
anything.
30 seconds, quick, we got to get him.
Yeah, but they sort of had to do it within, because the brain starts to deteriorate quite quickly, so they had to do it sort of within the hour kind of thing. So they said, we'll take him away for this scan, and then, we'll bring him back and you can bathe him and all that sort of thing. And I said, I can't. Yeah. I can't do it. He's not there anymore. Yeah. And, I could already see his lips had started to turn a little bit blue and things like that. And I just thought, I can't. I don't want to see him like that. He's going to get colder. And I don't want to see him like that. So, I turned that down. And just leaving the hospital empty-handed was just, it was just it was such a bizarre feeling. It's sort of a paradox in a way, because I'm a mother without a child. Yeah. It's, something that shouldn't exist. Yeah. So, it was again though, there was still a level of surrealness to it, in that, is this really happening to me? Like, you sort of, you don't see it. Yeah, you don't process it all right away. It's not a...
Well, I should know this, but what year did this happen?
2020.
I thought it was 2020 because I knew that it was in the height of COVID.
Yeah.
But in 2020, you don't think that mums are going to be leaving the hospital without their baby.
No.
So, going back to the 1950s... Sure. Yeah. It would have happened a lot more often, but 2020, we just don't hear about it.
And people don't talk about it either, which is,
why we're doing this podcast today.
Yeah. But, I found out afterwards, someone I know sort of said, I lost a baby girl, and I think, how did I not know this about you before? I had another lady that I knew say, I lost a couple of kids, like they were preemies, but nowadays they can do stuff. Yeah. Whereas back when she had her kids, they couldn't do anything to help her baby. So she lost 2 babies before she had her kids. So, and again, why didn't I know? People come out of the woodworks with these tales and you're like, I didn't know any of, how did I not know this about you? And how is this not
that we're
about?
suggesting you should go and tell pregnant women that
No.
No, that's exactly it. Like,
you just don't hear about it, so you don't think it can happen. Yeah. You don't realise that it's a obviously, things can go wrong and that there's always that sort of possibility, but you just don't realise how I mean, it's still not that common, but you don't realise that it's as widespread as it is.
Yeah, it is a lot more common than people would realise. I was looking at the stats, but it was last week, so I forgot. But it is actually, it's a lot higher than I thought it would be.
Yeah.
Given that we're in 2025.
Yeah.
I would have thought it would be a lot lower of maternal deaths or infant death.
Yeah.
So incredibly difficult to actually leave him in the hospital. He didn't have to have post-mortem at all, other than the scans?
No, just the scans. They did ask if they could take a sample of his heart, but at the time I couldn't bear it.
Oh,
because they were, it would have required,
yeah,
doing the whole Y incision.
Yeah.
And I just, selfishly, I just couldn't bear the thought of it. And I said no. But they said, okay, it's okay with his tissue sample and with his brain scan, that will be enough. Because the thing about his particular condition is he was the first to be tested from a fresh sample. All the other confirmed cases that they've had are from frozen samples. Because it's just so rare and the testing was so new. They only just developed it. It was like a group effort. There was 5 countries involved and they had 17 confirmed cases in 10 years worth of stored samples. So incredibly rare. So he was the first to be tested from a fresh sample. Yeah.
And did they confirm it was, the mito pre or post?
I mean, they took the tissue sample, I think maybe around day 3, but it took a few weeks.
Yeah.
It had to be sent over east and, all that lengthy process. So it took a few weeks to actually get the results back to confirm that it was this E73 that we,
Was that meaningful to hear that at all?
The specialist that we had been dealing with was really convinced that was what it was.
Yeah.
Not really that, the relief was that it's not a hereditary condition. That was the biggest relief in getting that confirmation that it's not hereditary. It's just a
really
mishap.
Bad luck.
Yeah, 1 in a billion. There'd been no cases of siblings having the same condition. So, no parent had to go through it twice.
Yeah.
But, it wasn't a survivable condition. I think they said most cases the baby survived about 2 or 3 days. The longest was 7. So, to know as well that there was nothing we could have done differently as well. So in a way it was a bit of relief having that confirmation because it gave us that, okay, well, there was nothing we could have done differently.
Yeah.
He was never going to pull through. And also, it's not genetic. It's not hereditary, sorry. So we don't have to worry about it happening again. Yeah.
So how was it going home to, I'm imagining his room was all set up, you got clothes from size 40 to size 4.
Yeah, we'd named him Logan really early on and everybody knew. So we had, I think it was my parents bought him a sign for his door that said Logan and stuff like that. And it was, the bizarre thing was my husband hadn't wanted to set up the nursery. We literally did it like weeks beforehand because he was like, I don't want to be one of those sad buggers that, sets up the nursery only to come home without their baby and...
Oh!
Yeah. So he was just, I don't know, it was like he sort of...
had a premonition type thing.
Yeah, he just didn't want to set up the nursery. He just had this thing that he didn't want to do it. And I was like, we need to get this done, we need to have stuff, like we need a car seat ready to bring him home and things like that. So, coming home to have that.
Was the car seat in your car?
Yeah, it was, yeah. He left my car at his dad's house and took his dad's car.
Oh,
so that,
okay.
Yeah, so that we didn't have to worry about that.
Yeah.
We had, because his dad couldn't drive anymore, so we sort of borrowed that for a bit before he sold it. So, yeah, that was, I know it broke his heart having to take the car seat out when we needed the car back. That was a tough one for him. But, yeah, coming home to the empty house, that was, incredibly difficult.
Would it have been easier? I mean, there's no easy.
No.
So it's just on scales of hardness, would this have been less hard or harder if your family had gone in and had cleared out the nursery? So his name wasn't on the door, the cot had been put away, the clothes weren't hanging up or in the drawers.
I mean, maybe in the beginning, but I think for me, tidying away was a cathartic process. You know, when I did go to do it, it kind of had a cathartic effect that, you know, it was a difficult thing to do, but also part of the process. So I think, I'm glad it was left to me.
And I'm asking that because it could have gone one of two ways. Like walking in and seeing it there must have been just an adding insult to injury type of thing.
Yeah.
But at the same time, so what we were talking about before we started recording is people don't talk about these things.
No.
So people they're afraid to say the name of somebody who has passed away because I don't want to upset somebody. And so what can happen is it feels like that person ceases to exist.
Yeah. And that was the thing for me as well. I made a decision very early on. I wasn't going to put him away for anybody.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
You know, I wasn't going to hide him from people to make them feel more comfortable.
Yeah.
You know, if I wanted him on display, you know, not him specifically, obviously, but if I wanted a representation of him on display, I would have it. And if I wanted to talk about him, I would talk about him and not really care too much about whether that made other people feel uncomfortable or not, because, that's how I felt you know, I'm a bit more sensitive to it now. But at the time, I didn't want to put him away for the sake of other people's feelings.
Look, I'm not sure I'd be more sensitive about it. But, you know, I saw that you posted it, like you posted one photo of him, I think. And, but yeah, I guess that's what I was thinking, that if you had come home and his room had been put away, it was like he'd been disappeared.
Erased. Yeah.
And that would, I just think that could have potentially been harder. But again, it's this scale of hard, which is just all hard.
Yeah. And like I was saying, it might have made things easier in the beginning, but then, you know, I felt like that was something I needed to do for myself eventually, sort it out for myself. And you know, because we knew we were going to try again as well for another baby. So it wasn't like it all had to just go in the bin, you know. I looked at it and I went, okay, if Logan had lived, what of this would be passed down to his sibling, and what would I have kept as just his? And that's the way I looked at it. So I kept a few things that were just for him, and then passed down, you know, the bedroom furniture and things like that. It's like, well, we would have passed them on anyway, so it's not like it's, you know, we don't need to clear it out, or you know, and you know, also, you know, when we fell pregnant with Killian, it was also a case of, well, he needs to have his own stuff as well, because he's still his own person. Yeah. He's not filling Logan's shoes. So it was a combination of the hand-me-downs that he would have had anyway, and also the new stuff. And so I found that was an important part of the process, I think.
So I want to talk about having a second baby. But before I do, you spoke about being a mum without a child. Mm-hmm. How did you go the first Mother's Day and Father's Day after
So Logan passed away on the Saturday and Mother's Day was on the Sunday.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah.
Oh, that's horrendous.
Yeah. So that was just the worst Mother's Day ever, completely devastating. And then the following year, his 1 year anniversary was on Mother's Day. That was a couple of really horrendous, emotional Mother's Days that just...
Has that ruined Mother's Day forever for you? I mean, you can't let it because you've got another baby.
Yeah. It's bittersweet, you know.
Yeah.
I'm so happy to have the child that I do have, but at the same time it does sort of, yeah, it stings a little bit as well.
Oh.
Yeah. And I think the same with Clint. Yeah, for the first Father's Day was rough. Yeah.
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 And had he already bought you a Mother's Day gift?
No, he's a very last minute shopper. I'm sure he would have been off to do it the day before if things had gone well.
Yeah.
But
He's like, fingers crossed she takes the full 7 days after the Caesar and can stay in there and I've got a bit of shopping time.
Yeah. I mean, he does his Christmas shopping Christmas Eve and, you know, like he's very last minute. So
he doesn't do it in a petrol station, think yourself lucky.
No, he does. Very lucky there.
Yeah.
But he hadn't. Yeah. The nurses at the tell you what, PCH, the nurses there were just unreal. They were so incredible. One of the nurses in particular, once she found out that we were pulling the plug the next day, she wasn't supposed to be working and it would have been a nurse we hadn't had before with us. So she went and organised to have her shift swapped so that she could be there with us for that continuity. But yeah, her and one of the other nurses got together and made a Mother's Day card for me. So yeah, Clint gave me that on Mother's Day, which was beautiful and devastating. Yeah, you know, it was made out of his footprints and yeah.
That's it. Beautiful and awful at the same time.
Yeah, heartbreaking, but lovely. You know, having that moment. You know, in 5 days where you don't leave the hospital, you have very little time to create memories and keepsakes and memento.
Positive memories.
Yeah. So to have something beautiful like that was really lovely, but yeah, just gut-wrenching at the same time, you know. Yeah.
Have you framed his footprints?
No, they had laminated the ones that they did, so I had them stuck next to my bed for a bit, but we sort of got to the point where we were getting a bit creepy and had basically made a shrine, and, you know, hubby sort of said, really? Do we, you know? So I sort of then put a few things away and then scattered things around the house, so it wasn't all just in. Yeah.
I think that's totally understandable to have a shrine. So, how long did you wait before having your second baby?
So Killian was born in 2022, so it was about 2.5 years later that we had him.
What was your anxiety levels like?
Oh, unreal. It was just he popped out 3 weeks early, so 8 months of just...
freaking out.
Yeah, just terror. Yeah. Just being constantly afraid. And, you know, we had extra appointments and extra tests and extra scans, and I felt like there was not a week that went by that I didn't have some sort of appointment.
But in the back of your head, you must have been going, but there was no way to tell with Logan. So I'm having all these scans to try and ease my mind. It's not working.
No. And in fact, I felt like it stressed me out more because I was, like I say, I was just going from test to test to test to test to appointment. And I just sort of was like, I just need a break from this, you know, because, you know, I remember going to the hospital for my pre-appointment And, and so we're going to do a C-section again, and it won't be like last time. It'll all be lovely and calm. And
you don't know that.
Yeah. But then, you get to hold your baby and cuddle him and do all the lovely things that you didn't get to do with Logan.
Oh.
And and I mention this because I was in a particularly emotional state this one day, and that just pushed me over. That just broke me hearing that. So that there's no amount of reassurance is going to help when you know how easily things, we knew we weren't going to end up with the same situation, the same condition, but your eyes are open now. You know what can go wrong, and you know that tests aren't going to pick everything up.
Well, the reality is that they test for the most common conditions.
Yeah.
But when you have a rare condition, all of a sudden you start learning how many rare conditions there are and how many people have experienced those rare conditions. And
rare conditions aren't that rare.
They're really not.
Yeah. Yeah.
And 1 in a million is great if you're part of the, 999,000, but if you're that one in, it doesn't matter if it's 1 in a million or 1 in 1.
Yeah.
If you're that one.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, and I imagine it would have been really difficult to hear, this isn't going to be like Logan, this isn't going to be like Logan, this is like...
Yeah. And
taking away from what you did have with Logan.
Yeah. And, finding out we were having another boy as well, that was really hard.
Yeah.
I had convinced myself that I was having a girl because I needed it to be a girl, because that would have made me feel better.
Like you weren't replacing him.
Yeah. And that it wasn't happening all over again,
Yeah.
So, to find out we're having a boy, I'm like, it's the same. Everything's the same, Yeah. And I was like, okay, we need to make it different. We need to make this a different pregnancy.
So you did. You had one that was full of stress.
Yeah. But, I did the one thing that I could control, which was, instead of announcing his name from day dot, we kept that a secret. And we nicknamed him Duke, short for Duke of Hazzard. Because we knew that that's what he would be.
Yeah.
So, it was... That was that I felt like that was the only thing within my control, because the pregnancy felt the same, I had all the same symptoms and things like that, the same cravings, and it all felt just exactly the same. So that sort of felt like the one thing that I could control. So it's like, okay, well, this is how we make it different.
Did you go back to the same hospital?
I did, yeah. I mean, my experience with the hospital was good. Yeah. Even though, it was the experience with my child that wasn't good. But the hospital was good. And I wanted to maintain, that at least. I was like, okay, well, at least I have some level of comfort in the fact that I'll know. Yeah, I'm going somewhere I know, and that I know made me feel
supported.
Yeah. So, same hospital.
And how much do you speak about Logan with his baby brother?
I mean, not a lot at the moment.
He's still pretty little.
Yeah. He's only 2.5. So, at this stage, not really yet. But, it's something I've sort of thought about quite a bit in terms of, how do I don't want him to be a secret, I want to be open, and you had a brother, and you can talk about him as much as you want, and that's all okay. But how do I do that without making Killian feel like he's, like Logan's on this pedestal and Killian, has to live up to that, so very conscious of
and
that
it's tricky
aspect of it.
Because you only had Logan for 5 days.
Yeah.
So, like you were saying, you don't have many memories. So it's not like you can say, oh, your big brother used to really love doing X, Y, and Z, or, so you want to be able to share him, but you've got such a little amount to be able to share.
Yeah.
I don't know how you do that.
Yeah, that was one of the toughest things for me was not having much of him. You know, we dressed him in his going home outfit. We gave him one of his soft toys, and because that's all we had to give him, because we didn't go home in between to get him anything else. It was just like, hey, Mum, run and grab something. Yeah. And she didn't know where stuff was, so... And because those were the only things that we had been able to give him, I wanted him cremated with them. Yeah. Because...
So he had them?
Yeah. I wanted them to be with him because they were the only things we had of him.
But that means that you don't have them?
Yeah. Sorry. So, yeah, coming home with practically nothing, you know, like the hospital gave us the blanket that they... Yeah. You know, and things like that. But it's not enough. You know, I'd gone to all the baby shops and specifically picked out a blanket for him. I was like, he will have the softest blankie in the world. And I felt them all, and I found the softest blankie. And I was like,
instead he got a scratchy hospital blanket.
Yeah, so coming home and there's that blankie that I had put aside for him, and it's empty. And that's... I sort of clung to that for months. I slept with that, and that was really hard for me because it was like, it's not got the weight
of him
to it. It's a blanket. It's not a baby, you know. But that was all I had to hold, to physically hold. You know, that was my thing that I physically held on to, even though he'd never gotten to have it. Yeah, that was the only thing that I felt like I had. Eventually, there's an organisation in America, I think it's called Molly's Bears, something like that. You give them, I think it's $20 that they charge, $20 American, and then being outside of America, I had to pay like $1 million in postage. But yeah, it's more of a donation, and they make weighted bears for parents who've lost a child, either a stillborn or an infant. And so you give them the weight of your baby and, you know, colours and themes and things surrounding your baby. And they will, you know, make the bear around those things. We didn't have an exact weight for Logan because they hadn't had time to weigh him when they scooted him off, but they'd said he was about 4 kilos. So I have a 4 kilo bear.
It cost $1 million.
Just for postage. So and that felt... It took a while to get it because they sort of have an intake thing, and then it took months and months. But when I eventually did get it, that held a level of comfort to it, to be able to hold my baby's weight. Yeah. There was comfort in that. Yeah.
Did you get to have a funeral for him?
We didn't have a funeral because of COVID restrictions, and
because I think when you had him that they were restricting it to 2 people. Yeah. So
yeah. Oh, I think for funerals you could have
10.
Yeah, it was something like that, 10 or 20 people. Yeah. So we didn't specifically have a funeral. We thought, what can we say about a 5-year-old?
5-day-old,
sorry, that hasn't already been said. So we basically just skipped straight to the wake. Mm-hmm. We just got our closest friends round and put on pizzas and just drank a lot. And just, we got flowers made up, wreaths and things like that, and did all the things that, you would have done at a, put a photo up and things like that. Had all the things you would have had at a funeral. We just didn't have that formality of it because, it just sort of didn't seem...
Well, you got to have your celebration while he was still alive. Yeah. So,
Yeah, so it made sense for us not to actually, and like I say, given the COVID restrictions, we couldn't have everybody there anyway, so... yeah, just sort of thought, everyone that we're going to invite already knows the story, basically, by the time it came,
Yeah.
they just felt easier to skip straight to the wake and just have everybody there for a good yarn and
a lot of alcohol.
Yeah, yep.
Yeah. And your marriage survived?
Yes. Yep. Very well. Like, we do say it sort of made us stronger, it brought us even closer together, which I know is not the case in a lot of instances, but yeah, for us, my husband was super supportive, and and for us as well, because it happened at conception, there's no blame to attribute, whether it's to yourself or to your partner. There was no blame, no guilt, nothing we could have done. So we didn't have that weighing us down, which I think can be a contributing factor with relationships. So yeah, we just sort of grew closer than ever. Well, we were already close. We're married, but
that doesn't actually mean you're close, but yeah, I know what you mean.
It added another level of, yeah.
If people are going through, they're going through the loss of a child, what would you say to them?
I'd say do what you feel you need to do for you. That was... You need to grieve your way. There's no one right or wrong way for you to do it. Everyone's different. Everyone needs to handle it differently. But, if you can obviously surround yourself by people who are supportive and who care and who are happy to listen, and happy for, because one of the things for me, I was happy to be around people where I knew that if I was feeling good, that was great, and if I suddenly felt like shit and needed to cry,
That's fine,
then that was okay too.
Yeah.
I felt like that was really important. So they're the people that you need to be around, I think, is the people that don't mind when you're...
the people who are going to love you when you're at your lowest.
Yeah, yep.
Is there anything, like in hindsight, so we're sort of 5 years on, is there anything that you look back now that you think this would have made this easier, or I would have done this differently, or this support would have made a difference?
I think we got really, really lucky in that we experienced it in the best way possible. Not that there's...
it's all layers of bad.
It's relative,
but...
yeah.
Yeah.
Everything that we, like I say, the hospitals were amazing. Like the nurses at PCH, they were so compassionate and empathetic, and I was like, how do you, you're in the NICU day in, day out, how do you maintain...
How are you not completely burnt out and sobbing and rocking in a corner?
Or switched off?
Yeah.
How are you not hard
Yeah.
from experiencing this all the time, So kudos to those guys. I think they're incredible. So yeah, from the hospital staff to the friends that just, once we got home, they would just rock up with, a meal that they'd made, because, we weren't cooking. It was, if there's not food in the fridge, then we're
not eating.
We're Uber Eats,
Yeah.
So, people rocking up with meals and bursting into tears the second they see us. I was so affected by how affected other people were. I hadn't expected it. I didn't.
Was that hard though? So I'm saying this as somebody who's cried 3 times so far in the interview. But was it hard? Because one of the things that I see is that what ends up happening is that the bereaved person ends up supporting the friend.
Yeah.
And you're like, dude, this is the wrong way around.
Yeah. People would show up and then, immediately burst into tears, and you give them a hug and they're like, oh, sorry,
Yeah.
and then they sort of carry on. So it went in cycles, you know. I'd have moments where I was okay and I was comforting my mum and dad.
Yeah.
And then I'd have moments where I was not okay and they were comforting me. So it's very cyclic, and, you know, you just sort of take turns at being the strong one and take turns at being the weak one. And, you know, you never all seem to be the weak one at the same time, if you like. So you get
We have a rule in our house. Only one person is allowed to melt down, get angry, be upset at any one time.
Yeah.
And
take it in turns.
That's exactly it.
Yep.
And quite often I'll announce that it's going to, like, I know that it's going to be my turn. So I get that this isn't about me, but I'm going to be happy. But yeah, it's a good rule to live by, that only one person is allowed to, which means the other people have to rally around till it's their turn.
Yeah. So it all seemed to work that way, which obviously made it easier in the fact that, you know, we took it in turns, we helped each other. You know, my parents live 4 houses away, so they were there a lot, which was really great in terms of having that support there and, you know, being able to talk about it freely, or to be able to just sit there. Yeah. Sometimes we'd just sit there outside, you know, having a cup of tea or having a drink if it was in the afternoon. Drinking started in the afternoon those days. Those early days were, you know. But, yeah, so that was really helpful to have them there. And yeah, like I say, to be able to take it in turns at being the one who's giving the support and the one who's receiving it. It never seemed to be that we all needed support at once, which...
Thank goodness.
Yeah.
It comes down to who's got the most reserves at the moment. Okay, I guess you're being the strong one right now.
Yeah. And that was, you know, it wasn't just me grieving. There were, you know, like I was very aware of that. I was like, that's their first grandchild, you know, not just any old it was their first. They were all so excited, you know.
But also this has happened to their daughter.
Yes. So they're grieving on 2 levels because
I can't take your pain away.
Yeah.
That's so hard.
Yeah.
And any thoughts for people who are surrounding somebody who might have lost a child? Any thoughts on, apart from some of the suggestions you've made, any thoughts on what they could do, how they could act, what they should say?
You know, just listen. You know, I wanted to talk about him. I wanted to keep him alive in my memory, you know. So having people that were happy to listen made a huge difference. I could, you know, and like I say, having people who were fine for me to break down. Yeah. You know, even if I felt fine when I got, you know, when we got together, and, you know, an hour later I just suddenly turn into a blubbering mess for 10 minutes because some random thing has triggered me, you know. But that's, you know, being in a position where you feel comfortable to do that with people. Let
And for grieving people, don't put yourself in a position where you're not surrounded by those people.
Yeah,
it's
definitely.
okay to look after yourself.
Yeah, that's it. You do. You have to put yourself first in that situation. And surround yourself by people that understand that and will let you be who you need to be at the time. Yeah. You know? I
heard this really lovely thing, admittedly a long time ago, and it was from a very reputable source because it was from a TV show. But it said... people have 3 deaths. The first when we take our last breath, the second when our body returns to the earth, and the third when our name is spoken for the last time. And I think for a lot of people who are grieving, having your loved one's name spoken, exactly what you say, it keeps them alive. Yeah. So it's nice to be able to still talk about them and not feel like you have to be afraid that you're going to upset other people.
Yeah, that's it. You know, especially, you know, it's nice on Logan's birthday. I have a couple of friends that will text and go, thinking of you today, you know, happy birthday, you know. And so to know that he's still thought of and remembered in that way is really beautiful and lovely. And it does help a lot to know that people haven't forgotten him. It was really hard, you know. Gradually everybody goes back to work, you know. So my dad went back first because he needed to. for him, you know, he needed the distraction really, you know. And then my mum had to go back to work, and then hubby had to go back to work, and one by one I sort of felt like everyone was, and it wasn't like I resented anyone for going back to work. They had to go back to work, you know.
Yeah, it feels like life's moving on.
Yeah.
And his life didn't get to move on, and that's not fair.
And I was just stuck there, you know. So that was really difficult, was having everyone move on. You know. They weren't moving on. They were still right there with me, but it just felt like
life has to go on.
And it felt like life was returning to exactly what it had been before we'd had him, I was like, no, the world has been irrevocably, I can't even pronounce words today, irrevocably changed.
Yeah.
You can't, how can we all just go back to what we were doing before? That's, you know, so that was a really hard thing to get my head around. Yeah.
Did you find support groups or things like that? And it's tricky because COVID.
Yeah.
So
yeah, that was tough.
Yeah.
I had an incredible, I always forget which way round it is, psychologist or psychiatrist from King Eddie, that we had video chats. So she was really helpful and supportive. She was incredible. And, you know, I had phone number for, can't remember the name of it, organisation of women that have lost either, you know, miscarriage, stillborn or infant death. So I had the phone number for them. And I used it once, I think. I only did it the once. But just having that option there to ring and talk to somebody that has had a similar experience and gone through that is... even just knowing that it's there, even if you don't use it, knowing that it's there can make a difference, I think. But yeah, I had that. But, you know, mostly I found that all the support I needed was...
with the people who were around you anyway.
Yeah. And I mean, obviously that's not the case for everybody. You know, I said to my husband, you know, we're really lucky, like, in that respect that, you know, we have all these amazing people in our lives that have come together to be here for us, you know. So, yeah.
Any final thoughts, anything you would like to add or share? Because you haven't shared enough and bared yourself. That's pretty much, I think, the extent of my story. Yeah. Well, yeah. Well, it's still at the beginning. But thank you so much for sharing all of that today and letting me ask so many very personal questions.
No, it's okay.
Really appreciate it. And thank you for sharing insights into your experience and for other people to hopefully, you know, if they are in a similar situation, know that you've made it out and you're as close to whole as you can be.
Yeah, and you can do it too.
That's exactly it. Thank you so much.
No problem.